Do you ever feel bogged down by all of the stuff inside your house? Now, today's guest, Shannon Layko, is here to help. She is the host of Paring Down, a podcast dedicated to helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that feels overwhelming. Now, through our conversation today, Shannon will help us explore the physical and mental clutter that distracts us from what truly matters in our lives. Stay tuned. I am Brad Nelson, founder of Debt Free Dad. I paid off about $45,000 of debt, have been debt free now for more than 11 years. I've also helped thousands of other people save and pay off tens of millions of dollars with the work that we do here at Debt Free Dad. Now, after listening to this episode, if you're someone who wants to take your finances a step further and you'd like to get better results, like with saving money and getting out of debt in as little as 30 to 60 days, you can start seeing these results. I'll be sharing some details about how you can get started with that later on in today's episode. Hey, Shannon, welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast. So glad that you are taking some time to hang out with us here today and share all of your expertise on paring down.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you share quick, how you got into this? What motivated you to start your podcast and really start you on this journey of helping people with this complicated and challenging thing of ridding yourself of things and stuff and cluttering, and even if it's not physical clutter, just, clutter that's in your mind and really giving you the opportunities to focus more on purpose.
Sure. I think like so many people, when they become parents, all of a sudden things become clear. And I started getting really overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that my kids came with. And, even when I got married, my husband and I had different thresholds for the amount of stuff we wanted to have around us. And then once you add in 1, 2, now we have 3 kids, it just it just gets out of hand so fast. And so we are a military family, and we were moving from Alaska to Florida, which is already an insane move in itself.
Yeah.
And, as we were getting ready to move, and even a little bit during the pandemic when we were in Alaska, I would watch like Tidying Up with Marie Kondo and The Home Edit, that kind of thing, and I've always been pretty good about getting stuff out, but I started kind of taking it more seriously. And then that big move, and we got to Florida, and it was a really stressful transition. I mean, I was very happy in Alaska. I'm a mountains girl, all of that. And it was very secluded. And I love that. I am a hermit by nature. So then we're suddenly in a very high traffic area that is just not my cup of tea. And on top of that, I just was overwhelmed by our house, right? And so that's when I was like, I want to recreate that peace that I felt in Alaska, not just in our house, but like I can't bring the mountains and the orcas here.
Yeah. Right.
Right? So like, how do I find that? And what I realized upon a lot of reflection is that it was really the slower way of life up there, right? Like there is no such thing as 2-day Amazon Prime. Like you can't get stuff on the barge to catch a can Alaska that fast. So I tried to recreate a slower life here as much as possible for my own mental health during that transition. And a big piece of that was just getting rid of as much clutter as possible inside of my home. And as I was sharing that process on my kind of private Instagram page, so many people were interested. This is such a common problem, especially with parents that are just overwhelmed by this stuff. And I thought, I really feel like there's room for more voices on this. We live in a consumerist society where we're constantly bombarded with every Amazon influencer and fashion blogger, all of that on social media, not to villainize them by any means, but we're getting so much of that messaging. And I don't think we're getting enough to counteract that of those who are out there really kind of pushing contentment and decluttering. And so, I decided to go ahead and start my own podcast to kind of talk about my experience so far. And it's really gone well because, believe it or not, like all my friends who couldn't agree more about my experience, it seems to be like there's a lot of us out there that are very overwhelmed. So so I have my Instagram at paring_down and the podcast. It's been great.
Right. Yeah. It almost takes a message like yours to actually wake us up sometimes. Cause consuming stuff is just so normal. Having lots of things is just it's normal for a lot of us. It's like the stress you talked about. It's that, you have that feeling of just overwhelm, but maybe sometimes people can't pinpoint. Maybe it's the stuff that you have in your house. How do you know if that's the issue?
Well, I think everyone has had the experience. I would say most people have had the experience of cleaning out just even like one dresser drawer. You're like, I can't fit all my t-shirts in here. I'm going to reorganize. And that dopamine hit you get from having a dresser drawer that is now perfect and you open it. Sometimes you just open the drawer and you look at it, right? Like you finally take care of your junk drawer and then you just walk by it, open it just to look at how calming it is, right? It's closet sometimes just to take a deep breath now, you know? And I think the more I discovered that kind of reaction, the more I realized, oh, this would be really helpful if my whole house felt this way. Um, and for me, I've done a lot of research into stress. So when I was 24, my mom passed away of bladder cancer. It was very fast. It was like a 5-month battle, very unexpected. So
Wow.
she was a triathlete and a registered nurse and cardiac rehab nurse. So, I mean, she ran 5 to 7 miles every morning. She swam a mile after work. She didn't drink. She didn't smoke. You know, it was, I mean, she'd have
Wow.
like a glass of wine here and there, you know, but
Yeah.
like very healthy. And she was only 54. And everyone on her side of the family lived into their 90s. And in her last days, she shared with me that she really felt that this had been brought on by heightened stress. My mom really struggled with managing stress. And so, especially as I entered motherhood, as my life became more stressful, and I noticed those patterns in myself, easily getting stressed, I actively have searched for ways to decrease stress. And, there's a study from UCLA in 2014 that came out and said that our cortisol levels actually rise with the amount of clutter in our homes. And that's
Yeah.
particularly true for women. So that stat in itself goes into my deeper why of having lost my mom and wanting to be healthy for my own family. And that, has been a huge reason that I've grabbed the bull by the horns when it comes to decluttering.
Yeah. Man, it's interesting. I was on your show. We haven't talked about this. Our stories are very similar. My mom passed away from cancer at 57 years old. I was only 27 at the time.
Oh, wow. Oh,
And that
gosh. I'm
really,
so
that
sorry.
yeah, I'm sorry as well. And that affected me though greatly with the way that I look at stuff, the way that I look at money, my life, how I wanted to live it. So it's interesting that we both have come from that, and have had that experience. There's another study that I just recently shared on my workshop here earlier this week from time.com that's found out they did this study out in the UK, and they found that speaking of stress, 60% of people who deal with stress, majority of it comes from financial stress. It is the number one thing that causes
Mm.
most stress related illnesses is money and financial problems, which obviously goes right hand in hand with a lot of the things that we're consuming and the things that we're spending our money on. So I think sometimes we're blind to that, like how much this stuff, how much our financial challenges really affect our overall quality of life and really our health as well.
Right. And the consumerist piece, decluttering doesn't exist without the consumerist piece. They go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
So as much as it's important to get the stuff out of your house because of the stress that causes, right? Like another study shows that it decreases your housework by 40%. And I did the math and I looked it up that the average woman who's in the workforce, this isn't even women who are at home in general, all day, every day, they do 2.7 hours of housework per was it per day? Yes. So if you take 40% of that, it was an hour and 5 minutes. So over an hour a day that you get back, that's 7.5 hours a week. That's 32 hours in a month. Like, we're also stressed trying to fit
Yeah.
everything in. Our clutter it's taking our time. It's stressful when you lose things, when you're tripping over things, and speaking of money, not only the money buying things to get that dopamine hit, that fades so quickly, and then you're just left with another dress in your closet that you never wear, that you can't find, and everything in your closet's a mess, and when you go to get dressed, you're stressed out by the decision fatigue, or you're
Yeah.
guilty because you see all the dollar signs hanging in there, or you feel bad about yourself because nothing fits you at your current weight. All of those things, not to mention that, but then you the money you spend on buying things you can't find again because you're repeat purchasing. Because my husband, he's open about this, he will repeat purchase things that are lost in the garage, and then we finally cleaned out the garage and he has like 5 or 6 hammers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's a waste of your money, when you think I'm going to hold on to this because what if I need it again? That's, I think, probably the biggest struggle I hear of people who they have these mental roadblocks when it comes to decluttering, and that big what if comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Um, as well as the money piece of feeling like I don't want to waste my money. And I always say, listen, you can't keep everything for the what if, because then you're not going to find it when what if happens, right? Or you're going to
Right.
waste money anyway by repeating the purchase, which is the point, right? Quote, the point of keeping it, so you don't have to buy it again in the future if you do need it. But that's going to happen anyway if the clutter
Right.
becomes a problem where you can't find anything. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that the clutter lies to us. We think that we need it and that it's the wise choice to keep it. But for the vast majority of us who have our basic needs met in life, it just makes more sense to pare down than to hold on to everything out of scarcity when in reality that's not going to benefit us anyway.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So what would you share? I mean, you mentioned just earlier, how that dopamine hits when you just clean out something as small as say like your junk drawer, which we all have, right?
Yeah.
What would you suggest to somebody? I just got done with a major move in my life, and I feel like I didn't really have that much stuff because I had moved 3 years prior to it, so I had gotten rid of a lot, but I still had a lot, and it was still overwhelming and stressful at times. So, what would you suggest to somebody who is looking around their house and they're like, "I do have a lot of things," but they are feeling that anxiousness, that overwhelmingness of like, just where do I even begin? Where do I even start? And how do you kind of tackle this?
Yeah, it is overwhelming. I think all of us, even those of us who think we aren't particularly stuff-oriented people, just being a human, things show up in your house, Like
Yeah.
we all have more that we could probably get rid of, unless you're an extreme minimalist and have been doing this for years, there's always more to find, even for me, and I've been doing this for years. So I would say the best place to start is if you're feeling overwhelmed, there are two good places, or not two good places, but two things to consider when choosing the first place to start. The first is choose somewhere that's not going to have sentimental items. So decluttering is kind of like a muscle that you're building, and you don't want to jump right into the stuff that's going to have all those mental roadblocks that's hard to
Yeah.
move past, right?
Yeah.
So the second thing to consider is make it a space that's going to impact you enough that you're going to want to keep going. Like you're exposed to that space enough that you're going to see it and be like, oh, like and get that dopamine hit over and over and over again, because that's going to make you want to go and do another space. So I give the example of like, let's say you're like, okay, the under the bathroom sink doesn't have any sentimental items. That's great and true. However, you probably don't go under the bathroom sink enough for it to propel you forward in your decluttering journey. So I always say that your entryway, or if you have a mud room, is an excellent place to start. Usually there's not really a lot of sentimental stuff in there. You might have a basket full of sunscreen, just get rid of the expired stuff. You might decide to keep your shoes somewhere else or get a different shoe organization system. You might have a bunch of like tote bags for grocery shopping or whatever you can declutter. It's not going to be sentimental, and it's going to have a huge impact every time you walk in the door. You're going to feel really, really good about that. Another option would be like, especially if you work from home, tackling just your desk, and you always zone down. So you might say, ooh, my desk is kind of overwhelming. Okay, focus on one area. I'm just going to do my drawer, or I'm just going to clear the surface, or I'm going to go through my files and I'm going to do 15 files today, So don't be afraid to break things down. But I would say that my two favorite are your mudroom or entryway, or your dresser, because the dresser is automatically a physical boundary. It's not gonna, you can't get more than what's in there. I mean, you might be trying to push the stuff down and push those drawers shut, but at the end of the day, there's only so much that can go in there. And then it's good for zoning. It's pretty clear. You can start with the top drawer, start with your underwear and socks drawer, because no one wants to dig through all the underwear they don't want to wear just to find the one pair they actually like. Just get rid of the ones with the holes or that are uncomfortable. You know what I mean? I always
Yeah.
say underwear is a great place to start because you're going to see that every day. It's going to feel real good to pick out the pair you like. So
Yeah.
those would be my suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we talked about this on your show. It's just really, it's starting small. And when you get out of debt, sometimes people get so overwhelmed because they looked at this huge mountain that they have to climb in order to get completely out of debt. And it's like, well, no, let's focus on just that little one first. When we
Right.
focus on that little one, it's like you said, you'll see it, you'll check it off. It provides that motivation to keep moving forward and seeing that progress. So I love that. What would you suggest to people who are, I'll give you an example here. I'm going to hold this up. These little Stanley cups. I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
you've seen all the craze about these, right? There's girls in our family, right? We of course we needed those.
Yes.
But-
Need the
right.
Stanley Cup.
Need. But so what do you suggest to people who are overcome by that social influence of what everybody else is doing? Because I mean, we are so driven by that, especially now with the onset of social media and phones. I mean, it's all right there all the time in front of us. What do you suggest to somebody who's constantly overwhelmed with that kind of emotion to do what everybody else is doing, and ultimately bring stuff into their life that really isn't needed to really serve their purpose or what they're wanting to do?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think we need to be gentle with ourselves. It's so easy to be really critical of people or of ourselves who get swept away by these trends that are obviously very shallow and unimportant. But as human beings, one of our primary needs is belonging. And so sometimes these items serve as an opportunity to feel like we belong. And whether that's right or wrong, it is what it is. So it takes a lot of courage in many ways to say, I'm not going to jump on that train. I'm going to I'm going to find belonging and trust that I'll find belonging without these external objects getting it for me. Because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us have ever bought something like that and then felt more accepted by a
Yeah.
group. Maybe in
Right.
middle school, frankly. But, even then, we then feel like imposters. We then just feel like, I know I'm not a cool girl, but I have my Stanley, so maybe they think I am, right? It's still insecurity driven. So these are nuanced conversations to have, internally with ourselves, but also with our children, to be gentle, and help learn kind of that it's okay to want to feel like you belong. That's natural. And let's find some healthier avenues to help our friendships flourish in a deeper, more fulfilling way. A really practical step here is to change what's happening in your social media feeds. I think we all
Yeah.
know this, but when we see the influencers, and a lot of us might kind of justify it by saying it's just giving me ideas so that
Right.
next time I do need a water bottle, I know which one works really well,
Yeah.
right? But what really happens is it leads us to impulse buy. So something I've done is I appreciate sometimes with influencers kind of telling me what to get and what to do, because I don't know where to start when I want to buy a new tennis dress.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but what I've done is I have a list in my iPhone, on my notes app, of handles that I really love, like fashion bloggers that I really like their stuff, or Amazon bloggers that I know often put up really cool kid stuff that might be useful or whatever. I just don't have them in my feed. So then the next time I'm trying to pack for a trip and I'm like, oh gosh, I wonder if there's something that would be helpful for being on an airplane with my kids. I can then go into my list. I find the one that I know has kid stuff. I go look at it and see if they have something that might be helpful for me. Or I'm looking for a tennis dress. I go to my fashion blogger. I might go to her like to know it page and I search tennis dress, right? And she might have one that she shared. But that makes us slow down and be more intentional about using influencers for only when we're actively in need of something. We're not just getting random ideas from them in our feeds.
Yeah.
And furthermore, I think it's important that, because we have so much of that messaging, like I talked about at the beginning, that we, of the consumerist side of things, that we purposefully follow people who have contentment and decluttering accounts, and debt-free accounts, that kind of thing, because if we're going to have the other stuff in our feeds, we really got to balance it out. And it's a much smaller group of people that are doing the opposite, right? But they are out there. I was amazed, when I started my paring down account, at how quickly I found other people with similar messaging
Yeah.
as me.
Hmm.
And it's really nice to have that in my feed, because, 2 weeks ago was Amazon Prime week. And most of my feed was telling me, you don't need it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It will go on sale again if you really need it down the line. You don't need to try it. You don't need all of the stuff that's being thrown in your face. And that reminded me. So when I did see the Amazon Prime stuff in my ads, because those will get you no matter what,
Oh yeah.
I had that messaging in my brain to stop me from doing that quick thing. And then my last little piece of advice, besides the notes and unfollowing and all that, would be to, when it comes to those ads on a really practical level, um, take a picture of it, like screenshot it, and then put it in an album in your phone. I do this all the time, called Things I Want. And I'm like, because the algorithm knows you. They're like, you definitely would love this matching sparkly dress with your daughter to take her to Taylor Swift. And I'm like, you're right, I really would. And so then I screenshot it and I put it in my wants, my whatever. And I go back every once in a while and I'll go like look through that. It's similar to a save for later on
Oh
Amazon,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't fall for that ad, or I definitely didn't need that, or that would have been a waste of money, right? And so it just slows you down. You still kind of get the dopamine hit of making sure you don't forget about it, but then you're not actually spending the money or causing more clutter to come into your home.
Yeah, those are all such great tips. I love that you say, just slowing the process down, because marketing is just so good. And,
So good.
the social media algorithms are just so good. And it's, man, they're just so good at getting you to quickly act and spend that money. So I love that you use that word slow down. You also brought up the word contentment. And I want to share this because you said in your podcast description, you mentioned that it's not about reducing for the sake of reducing, but about finding the perfect balance to guide us towards a life of deep contentment. And I think the word contentment for a lot of people isn't something that they regularly think about as being content, because we're constantly being told what we have isn't good enough. and we need to buy more and more and more. Can you talk about the word contentment and how that fits into your overall quality of life and just having less stress when it comes to wanting to buy things or having things in your home?
Yes, I could talk about this all day. Contentment isn't saying you don't have any ambition anymore. I think people confuse contentment with complacency,
Yeah.
and we need to get past that because contentment is when you are truly fulfilled in life as it is, and you can be excited about the future. And so I would say that when it comes to contentment with our stuff, we often think, I'll be content when, I'll be content when I have a house that has enough rooms for all my kids in it, or I'll be content when I get X, Y, and Z, right? And it's counterintuitive, but the truth is that contentment is found actually when you have less. The less you have, the more contentment you'll be able
Yeah.
to find, because then you're getting off this rat race of saying, when I get this, then I will be happy. And instead, you're looking around, finding ways to be grateful for what you have right now. You're As you get rid of stuff, as you declutter things out of your home, you are then more grateful for what you keep because you've been intentional about keeping it. And that adds to the contentment piece. So that's huge. And then on top of that, I would say that living with less really underscores contentment, because when you free up your home and therefore free up your time because of that housework decreasing, your stress has gone down. So you have more energy to put forth towards the things that are truly fulfilling for you. Then your life is going to start to have more purpose attached to it. Because a lot of us would like to get to our deathbeds and look back and say, I'm really happy with the life I lived. But most people, research, we know they get there, they look back and they say, I wish I had done that. They have these regrets. And it really centers around being more purposeful in their lives,
Yeah.
oftentimes with their relationships. I love Joshua Becker's definition of purpose. It's where your skill set, your passions, and meeting the need of another person or of others collide. It's that
Wow.
intersection, that Venn diagram. And he says that, the meeting the needs of other people piece is really where something goes from being a goal to then having purpose. And that can be as much as it was pouring into your immediate family. It can be on a community level, or it can be global. But the point is that those who look back on their lives without regret are the ones who feel like they really lived a purposeful life, that they had a skill set, or they were passionate about something, and they found a way to better other people's lives. And we might think, well, should I really have to live my life for other people? We live in such a me individualistic culture, especially here in the United States and in Western
Right.
cultures. And there was a study that showed that high generosity people are 80% more likely to feel fulfilled in their lives when we are generous with our time, with our money, with our purposes, right? And so it is really important, if you want to be living a life of contentment, to be generous. And I think most of us, we are bogged down by over scheduled calendars. We are running from one extracurricular to the next. We're bogged down by the amount of stuff in our house. We don't want to have anyone over because we're embarrassed by the amount of stuff in our house. We're exhausted at the end of the day. And therefore, generosity goes out the window because we can
Right.
barely get by ourselves. How are we
Yeah.
supposed to give to others, right? And by decluttering and finding that contentment, your energy just goes way up. You're not bogged down by all these things that don't matter, by desiring more and more and more that you're just going to not care about on your deathbed, right? Instead, you're going to be starting to have this energy to pour out into the world around you. So decluttering is not just about having an aesthetically pleasing home. Instead, it's about making space for that contentment and therefore for that purposeful life.
Yeah, this is so good, Shannon. I mean, I think everything you're saying, because I'm just like so good, because it fits all in with what we talk about when it comes to reducing debt and reducing financial stress. It just goes hand in hand. It's awesome. And you brought up this whole idea of time and this loss of time. You actually did a social media post I saw was on your page, and you had said that there are 3 invisible repercussions of making purchases that you don't need. And one of them was loss of time. The second one was distracted from your overall purpose. And the third one was regret that you mentioned. I think a lot of people tend to forget about the opportunity cost of making these purchases. They'll think about that thing that they're getting, but what they tend to forget about is what they're losing. Can you dive in just a little bit to this post and how that all fits in?
Sure. So the biggest piece here is that everything you buy, everything that comes into your home is also taking your time. Whether it's part of the decision fatigue because it's clothing and you're trying to figure out what to wear, you also have to figure out how to wash it. You have to, all of that, right? Everything is time. You're going to be washing another water bottle. You're going to be putting everything away. You're going to be finding a place to store it. It takes up space. So nothing is just you get it in the moment and then that's the end of that. Everything in your house, it takes your time. And so there's
Yeah.
so many like I said in that post, invisible repercussions because at the moment we don't see them. They're invisible to us. All we want is that dopamine hit. We want that cool new thing. We want that next gadget. We want whatever it is, that thing that told us at TJ Maxx, you should buy me. I'm a
Yeah.
cute salt and pepper shaker, right? But then what do you got to do if you get a new salt and pepper shaker? It's really cute. You got to make sure you have salt and pepper and you got to pour it in there and you got to, you know what I mean? You're gonna have to rinse
Yeah.
it out. You got to find somewhere to put it. And then the kids take it off of the table and they pour it on the ground and then you have to clean it all up. And you probably would have just been happier keeping your old salt and pepper shaker in the pantry and calling it a day, instead of all this time wasted because TJ Maxx told you to get this cute one to put on your
It's so
table.
true.
You know what I mean? So we don't think about those things, but the
Yep.
more you slow down your consumption and the more you declutter and you start to get rid of these things, that motivates you. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to buy that kind of stuff again and go through this. But, once you really slow down and start thinking, okay, what time could this add to my life? Then it becomes much easier to pass on a purchase.
Yeah. And you mentioned TJ Maxx. That aisle to the checkout is crazy. You really got to have your blinders on in there.
I know. I'm like, oh, this cute notebook would be great to take,
Right.
notes on in church. I'm like, Shannon, you have an entire, notebook pile in your office closet. It's
Right.
fine.
And sometimes it's not even you. Sometimes it's your kids going through that aisle. And that's my next question for you. It's like, so when you got kids, how do you practice this balance between, decluttering and keeping, a really good organized home that isn't overwhelming you, but then without depriving your kids or feeling like you're depriving your kids?
Yeah. So, first of all, if you have young kids, I have a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Oh my
Let
goodness. Oh, you
Yeah.
are busy.
It's a time. It is a time in life, let me tell you. The house, the biggest mistake, honestly, that I see, what stresses a lot of parents out who are on their decluttering journey, getting rid of toys and that kind of thing, is that they feel like their home is supposed to look nice all the time if they've decluttered or if they're trying to declutter, and then that stresses them out. So
Right.
first, let me just say this. Your house is going to look like a tornado came through it if you have kids. I don't care how little of the amount of stuff you have is. I have a babysitter here today, and not every day. I'm so happy she's here today. But anyway, the point is that I ran out this morning, I came back, and that we had cleaned the house, generally speaking, before she came over this morning, and it just looked like a hurricane came through. Right, there's Play-Doh everywhere, and there's toys everywhere, and my daughter had changed her outfit 4 times and left every single outfit in the hallway. Right, I mean, just chaos, and I'd been gone for less than an hour. And we have a really decluttered home. So I just want to encourage parents with that like the goal isn't that your house doesn't look like kids live there. Your children
Right.
live there. They are allowed to live there. However, there are some really practical tips for ensuring that they can live there happily, but so can you. You
Yeah.
deserve to have a calm space to live in as well. And this is possible. So for us, we implement the 10-minute rule when it comes to toys, which is if the toys take longer than 10 minutes to clean up when there has been a kid tornado, at the worst kid tornado there is, if it takes longer than 10 minutes to put all the toys away, we have too many toys. And so,
Love that.
I literally will set an alarm clock when I do feel really overwhelmed, or like a timer on Alexa. And I will say, set a 10-minute timer, and I start picking up and help. Of course, my kids help, but we start doing that. And if she goes off and there's still a fair amount on the ground, we say, okay, it's time to declutter. So that's a big piece there too. I would also encourage parents to remember that kids, they play so much better. I mean, I've had a lot of early educators on my show to underscore this. They play so much better. Research proves that when they have fewer options.
Yes.
They become more imaginative with their play. They become more independent with their play. And it helps their curiosity grow. It helps like I said, their imaginations grow. All of these things that are so important for kids. And as parents, we feel frustrated when our kids say they're bored, especially when we have a lot of toys. We're like, well, then just go play. but they don't know where to start. And so
Right.
for us, we don't really keep toys in the kids' rooms. My daughter has one thing in her room because my kids do 90, it's the whole thing, but they do have to spend 90 minutes in their rooms by themselves a day. We do a quiet time situation / nap. And so I want them to have something in there to do. I'm not
Right.
trying to send them to jail. And
Right.
anyway, so because we do have a playroom and we haven't always, it's a long story. Military family, you move from house to house. So we
Yeah.
had a formal dining room in this house we moved into. And I was like, well, we certainly don't need one of
Yeah,
those in our
right.
life right now.
Who uses those, by the way? We have one too, and we're like, what do we do with this?
Right? We turned ours into a playroom.
Right.
But again, by the way, playrooms should be space for them to play, not storage space for your toys. It's
Right.
space for them to play. So our toy room is mostly just one big open space with a couple cubes and a couple baskets. And that is it. Our toys are very minimal for that 10-minute rule, but also to give them space to play. If there's nowhere for them to make a giant train with their wooden train set, why even have it? But so back to their rooms. My daughter has just her Barbie dream house in her room. So, and that is it. I mean, literally she has her stuffed animals on her bed and she's got her Barbie dream house. And she has loved that thing. So a lot of my friends will say, "Oh, my daughter, she just gets over that really fast. She, played with it for 2 days." And then, you see a bunch of them on Facebook Marketplace that came out this past year for Christmas. And I think one of the big reasons my daughter really sticks to that is it's her only option. And so now it's not that she like begrudges playing with it. It's that she's attached to it. It's the
Yeah.
only thing. So she knows what she likes to do in there, and her little doggies play together, and she puts the girl down the slide and she rearranges it and whatever she does. And on top of that, we had our small group from church over this past Sunday. And so there were 1,000 children in our house. And all the parents were like, "I cannot believe that my child hasn't come and asked me for anything in the last hour and a half." And of course, there's novelty being in another kid's house.
Oh yeah.
Kids
Right.
play better. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I had a parent be like, "She's just been in there playing with the Barbie thing." And another one saying, "I think that because there's nothing else in there, it's just exposed to them. It's so clear to them what to play with that they say, okay, I don't have to make a decision." And so then they just go off in their little imaginative worlds
Yeah.
and they can have these amazing experiences when we're not asking them to first sift through all of the options before they can get to the imagination.
Yeah.
It's too much. So yeah, I think that you can really find a great balance by kind of implementing some of these ideas for you and your kids to both experience peace in your house.
Yeah. I'm going through the same thing. I went through this move, and my daughter is going to be turning 6 here next month, and she too had a lot of toys, just a lot of things, and most of the stuff she didn't play with. And I did have that guilt of getting rid of it, but I was like, you know what? We do have to get rid of some of this stuff. And I got her included, and she got to choose which things she kept, which things she got rid of. Some of those things that she decided to keep, I decided to get rid of anyways later, because it's like, I know you're just keeping this, but you don't play with it. But it has
You're the
been that way.
parent, and that's
Yeah.
okay. You're the
Right.
parent. Yeah, you
But
can gamify it though. It is
yeah.
fun. You can make it fun for the kids.
Right. And I've noticed the same thing though. Like now that she has less toys, she has one toy box and everything fits in there. She has nothing else anywhere in the house. And when she goes to play, she opens it up and she's playing immediately rather than, just being surrounded by all of these things.
Mhm.
It really has been an improvement for sure. It's been great. So now that you talked about the kids, my last question for you, Shannon, before I want you to share where people can find out more information, because I love what you're doing and I love your message. What happens when you have a spouse or a partner that is the clutter bug and you're the one who wants to, start getting rid of things and decluttering? Because this is a battle that I find when it comes to taking control of your finances is you often have one partner who really wants to get motivated because they're feeling that stress, but the other one's kind of dragging their feet and not really wanting to come to the table on that. And I'm guessing you probably experienced that too when it comes to relationships, when it comes to things and stuff and decluttering. What kind of suggestions do you give to a couple that is in that type of a situation?
Yeah, so I know this firsthand. My husband is a stuff guy, as I kind of, referred to that story of getting married and being overwhelmed by his threshold for things.
Yeah. Yep.
So I actually had him on the podcast. If anyone wants to listen to it, it's a very funny episode because it's just real life. I found out on air that he has like hidden ice cream scoops in the house. I mean, it's hilarious. That's episode 19 of the Paring Down podcast. If you want to hear his side of things, because we went also through like, hey, what have I done that's helped you declutter? What have I done that has kind of put up your defensive walls? Like, what could I have done better along the way to encourage you? It was a great conversation, also hilarious. But yeah, I would say the biggest piece here, because I hear this question all the time, like, how am I supposed to declutter my home if my husband or my wife isn't on board? I promise you can start with your stuff. I think we use it as an excuse. Well, I'm never going to get there. So why even start? Because so my partner won't do it.
Yeah.
But if you start with your stuff, first of all, you're going to see a big improvement when you walk into your closet, open your drawers, anything that you use, your water bottles, your blankets that you use, whatever. You can declutter your stuff first. And I promise that almost by osmosis, it starts to affect your spouse or your
Yeah.
children, even. But the more you start with kind of demanding someone to meet you where you already are, where your decision has been made that this would be good for your house and for yourself, your mental health, whatever, that demanding kind of a posture is only going to make them want to keep their stuff more.
Yeah.
And something my husband said that really helped was when I showed more curiosity and why he wanted to keep certain things instead of saying, "Oh, like, I cannot believe you have this ridiculous towel in here still. Like, this thing's a million years old. Like, why in the world won't you get rid of this?" Right? Instead, and I say why, but I'm not actually asking. But saying, "Hey, this towel seems really important to you. Is there a story attached here that I don't even know about?" And it is amazing what they will share. And my husband said that actually helps him then to get rid of the stuff because what he really wants is acknowledgement of whatever that represents to him, and he wants it from his partner in life to validate that he is not an irresponsible human being for having acquired his stuff. Instead, he wants to tell me the story attached to it. He wants to tell me what his dreams were with this tool. He wants to tell me why this gadget excited him. And once he tells me about the podcast he listened to that made him want to buy this gadget and why he got it, even though he never uses it, once he tells me that whole story, he's happier to let it go because then it feels like it validated his entire experience. And so I would just say to be gentle and approach with curiosity, in addition to just really starting with your own stuff.
Yeah, those are all great tips, Shannon. So, hey, where can our listeners learn more about you, get your podcast, and anything else that you're doing out there?
Sure. So you can find my podcast, the Paring Down Podcast. I always try and let people know it does not have an I in it. I know that is confusing. So PARING is not like a pair of socks. So there's that. And then Paring Down on Facebook, it's paring_down. And you can also visit my website, theexpertbeginner.com, where you can find my newsletter. I have a blog. I have a book that was published in 2020. All of that stuff is on my website, theexpertbeginner.com.
Awesome. Shannon, thanks so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, we get that getting out of debt isn't easy, but with our help and with your consistency and discipline, we promise you guys this will be some of the best work that you guys do in your entire life. If you want to pay off debt, save more money, and take control of your finances and start seeing some amazing results in as little as 30 to 60 days, all you got to do is head over to debtfreedad.com, click on the green button at the top of the page, and we're going to show you how you can get started. Thanks for joining us on today's show, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.